And good afternoon, everybody. Very glad that you're here with us on this Saturday. Always, it becomes the high point of my week as I'm here with you, and it will continue to be that. Going to have a good show today. We got a lot to talk about, some of it referring back to the debate. You remember that. Also, we're going to be talking to Kathy Berkshire, who is the president of Honor Flight Northeast Indiana. As the Honor Flight Northeast Indiana crew, they go back into the air this coming Wednesday, and they will take a whole plane full, an A321, of very deserving veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the monuments for them and others like them, and for us to dump some appreciation on them for all that they've done. And then in hour number 2, segment 1, our good friend from Real Clear Politics, Philip Wegman, he's the White House correspondent. And not only is he the White House correspondent, but he was in the press room in Philadelphia, right next to where the debate happened. In fact, as soon as the debate was over, former President Trump, current Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, they both made their way into the press room. And so it'll be interesting to find out what Philip has to say about all that they found and what they heard. All that's coming up on today's program. Some other things before we get there, just so you know, we're trying to follow all kinds of things. This is not really the debate or anything, but Taylor Swift, you've heard. Taylor Swift, who, and this will fry some of your heads, I like Taylor Swift as far as being a musician. I mean, she's not, the greatest composer I've ever heard. She's also not the greatest singer I've ever heard. But her ability to put on a program and to draw people to her and to make over $1 billion on one tour, that's no small thing. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see what happens that goes on with Taylor Swift. But she said this: I'm going to be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. Now, before I go on with whatever else she said, it's her right to do that. Okay, it's her right to do that. If she wants to put it in print, it's her right to do that. It's my choice then to do one of two things. A, either don't read it, or B, read it and then give it no merit. Don't think much of it. And that's kind of where I find myself. She says, I'm voting for Harris because she fights for the rights and causes, I believe, need a warrior to champion them. Okay. Now, I don't want to beat up on Taylor Swift today, but can I just ask you, when she says this, I'm voting for her because she fights for the rights and causes, I believe, need a warrior champion. Okay. They might need a warrior champion. When has Kamala Harris ever been that warrior champion? When has she ever been the one that stepped into the fray and said, okay, I'm here to fight for you, Taylor, and we're going to do this? She says, I think she's a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we're led by calm and not chaos. I know you don't like Donald Trump. Taylor, I know you don't like Donald Trump. And guess what? That's fine. That's your choice. I'm okay with that if that's what you want to do. But at the same time, please tell me, where is it that you have seen her leadership in these ways and to where she is always the voice of calm and not chaos? All she's had to do is pull her act together to make a somewhat professional presentation at her 90-minute debate with Donald Trump. Other than that, she has never shown up for anything. Nothing. No press conferences, no talking to the press on the back of her plane, nothing. She's never showed up at the border. She's gotten near it. I mean, she was, El Paso and then in Southern California. She was near the border. But as far as stepping up there and helping the people at the border and helping them as they greet people that are coming across the border, has she ever done that? She said, I was so heartened and impressed by her selection of running mate Walz, who has been standing up for LGBTQ plus rights, IVF, and a woman's right to her own body for decades. Well, he's also the one that stepped up to the plate and stood in the gap for people that were taking stands against our country. And Taylor, not all of them during the Trump administration. She did the same thing during her own administration. But she has helped oversee the dismantling of Milwaukee. Listen, let me tell you something. Her great running mate, who is so amazing, Governor Walz, has practically destroyed his own state. Destroyed it. And you're excited because that's who Kamala Harris has picked to be her running mate? Par for the course. Knock yourself out. So, if that's what trips your trigger, you go right ahead. Now, so that's her endorsement. I like this. Patrick Mahomes, quarterback, Kansas City. Super Bowl. By the way, Taylor, he's the quarterback on your husband's team, future husband's team. Here's what Patrick Mahomes said. I don't want my place and my platform to be used to endorse a candidate or do whatever, either way. I think my place is to inform people to get registered to vote. It's to inform people to do their own research and then make their best decision for them and their family. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? On this date, I choose Patrick Mahomes before I choose Taylor Swift. That'll take two of my daughters and drive them right out of their mind. Caitlin Clark, who's, by the way, may be on her way to become the WNBA Rookie of the Year. She plays for the Indiana Fever. She said, educate yourself with the candidates we have, the policies that they're supporting. I think that's the biggest thing you can do. And that's what I would recommend to every single person that has opportunity in our country. I didn't hear Republican. I didn't hear Democrat. I didn't hear Trump. I didn't hear Harris. I didn't hear any of that. Basically, both of these athletes are saying the same thing. People need to get into a position where they are making their own decisions based on what it is that they've found and what it is they've seen. They just need to get there and do it. And that's the bottom line there. I'm going to be back with more straight ahead. Very, very, very glad that you're with us here on the Pat Miller program on this Saturday. And don't forget, before the end of the program, we're going to talk a little bit about our marching band update as well. So make sure you stay with us through the balance of the program here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. Hey, welcome back as we go into our second segment here on this Saturday. So very glad you're with us. Don't forget, coming up after the bottom of the hour, the president of Honor Flight Northeast Indiana, Kathy Berkshire, will be with us in the studio, and we'll talk about it because they go back to the skies this coming Wednesday. That's this Wednesday. They take another whole plane full of very deserving veterans, men and women, to Washington, D.C. so that we can remember them and honor them for what they did for us. Before I do that, let me go to one of the things as a follow-up. I was talking a little bit about Kamala Harris at the start, and I want to go a little bit into something that I'm calling the courts and Kamala Harris. Look, there is nothing on the planet that Democrats like more than demagoguing about democracy, especially during an election. But the democracy they talk about, democracy is one of those words. Well, it's got to, they said it was democratic. Okay, democracy is in the eye of the beholder. It's in the eye of whoever's holding it up and whoever's saying it and whatever context they put it in. That doesn't mean it's democracy as we know it. But the democracy that they're talking about right now isn't the republic or our founders established. It's not the same democracy. The system's separation of powers. This is the executive branch, the president and all of his people and his secretaries. This is the legislative branch, the Senate and the House of Representatives. This is the judicial branch to make sure whatever it is that the House and the Senate pass is legal law, and that whatever it is that the executive branch enforces out of those laws is in line with it. That's what they're talking about, okay, and what happened. That's the separation of powers. It's seen by Democrats as something different than that. It's actually seen as kind of a nuisance. It's a problem. You ever get a thorn in your finger? You're out working or you're doing something with some wood, and a little splinter of wood that you can hardly see it gets in your finger, and you're like, well, I'll get that out later. It bugs you all day long, doesn't it? That's what the separation of powers is to the Democrats. It's a nuisance. It's an obstacle. It gets in their way of their agenda. And know this, regardless of what they say, if you go back and if you look at any agenda positions held by the Democrats, whenever it is, whatever it is, whenever you look at it, always, what happens is it is an agenda to control the American people. We will tell you where you can have your small business. We will tell you if you're in line with our goals or not. We will tell you if you're going to bake that cake for an LGBTQ crowd. We will tell you that since you're not for abortion, here's what you need. I mean, they want to talk about now about different levels of taxation to states that don't allow people to get an abortion. Our Supreme Court came out and said that Roe v. Wade was too much, not in what it allowed, but in the fact that it allowed anything. Because according to the Supreme Court, and ladies and gentlemen, please go study your Constitution. According to the Supreme Court, abortions are not a federal law position. They belong to the states. They belong to the states. If you go back and read our Constitution, we are not just the united government. We're the United States of America. Why is that? Well, because states hold equal to or sometimes more power than is held by the federal government. And we need to get to that. We need to understand that. We need to see exactly what it is that's trying to be done to us. And part of the reason, and you can scream about, you can start screaming about how it is, well, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're trying to, here's the problem. And the reason I'm saying it this way is sometimes Republicans have been as egregiously messed up as Democrats. We cannot allow somebody to just step in and grab a huge portion of our government and rewrite who and what it is and say, well, we're doing this because it's what's right for the government and because this is what we want. This is where you get all the nonsense about, hey, so let's do this. Let's pack the courts. Go back and study FDR. Go back and study FDR. Go back and look at what it is they've tried to do relative to things constitutionally. You can't go in and just advertently say, it's time to pack the court. We don't want 9 justices. We want 26. Pat, now you're just grabbing numbers. That's all they're doing. Look, if they grab numbers and then Republican grab numbers and then they grab numbers, if they have to pack the court with 117 justices in order to get it to be a court that will do what the Democrats want, then guess what? That will become their goal. And Kamala Harris, as president, is getting ready to stand right there with them. Look, Democrats reversed the Supreme Court for decades, so long as the left-wing majority handed down verdicts that were favorable to the left. And they denounced anybody that questioned the legitimacy of the nation's highest court. When rulings legalized abortion, when they legalized same-sex marriage, we were told, well, it's the law of the land. In other words, the justices have spoken, now shut up and obey. Predictably, the court was sacred under Democrat rule suddenly, and it became deeply flawed institution when it became more conservative. When Donald Trump appointed 3 conservative justices to the court, Democrats went out of their minds, and they started peddling this idea of packing the court and getting as much left-wing justices in there as we can. Suddenly, conservative justices found themselves targeted over phony ethics violations and pressured to recuse themselves and having their houses, some of them, their homes abused by people out there protesting them, their families, their wives, their children, threatening them. Look, this is insanity. If this is how you function, we're going to follow that court. We're going to follow their rulings, and we'll do it as long as they do what we want. But as long as they do something different, we're going to go after them. That's Venezuela. That's a country of far less prestige and far less hope than the United States of America. In the United States of America, historically, it's not been, well, we'll just cram that court around until that court does things the way we want them to do it. No, historically, what we've said is, that's our court. We will follow what they say. Until we pack the court? No. Until you can find a legislature that will come in and do a law that's different that the courts can agree with. Not just agree with it because it sounds good, but agree with it because it accomplishes what they want to accomplish, but it does it while following constitutional paradigms. And that's where we are not at. Look, for a century, Democrats have dreamed of expanding the court. I mean, it was the Supreme Court was their crown jewel. Democrats began peddling the idea of packing the court with left-wing justices. Suddenly, conservative justices found themselves targeted. Not a new idea. Democrats have been doing this for 100 years. As I mentioned, this went all the way back during the administration of Franklin Roosevelt. Well, the idea of packing the court was not popular back then, even with Democrats, by the way, and not popular now. Back in 2021, when several Democrat members of Congress mentioned expanding the court, the Heritage Foundation, oh, that's that conservative. Yeah, it's a conservative group, but they're following the Constitution. And they reported, in many ways, what's happening is mirroring the court-packing schemes of President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1930s. FDR threatened to put some more justices on the high court in response to the current justices striking down what? Some constitutional ideas? No, striking down his New Deal programs. That was his baby. You can't knock this down. We'll keep this as long as we want. Perhaps realizing that court packing just doesn't sit well with most Americans and it lacks support in Congress, Kamala Harris is going to pursue what I think is going to be her plan B. Should she win the presidency in November, she's going to go after plan B, term limits for Supreme Court justices. In this initial volley, in this war that's called Court Reform Now, a group formed by House Democrats, the fact that Congressman Adam Schiff and Jamie Raskin are part of the task force says just about everything I need to know about their agenda. You get two guys. Look, whatever Jamie Raskin isn't and what he hasn't screwed up, don't worry, Adam Schiff has and he will. These guys are a disaster looking for a place to happen. What's the plan of this? Term limits, more justices, ethic codes. Ethic codes enforced by whom? By an independent review board. And it's not under the auspices of anything. It's just this independent review board. What are they going to review? They would actually drum up alleged ethics violations as a way to remove justices who aren't serving the Democrats' radical agenda. And the violators could be anything that the Democrats and their little board, anything they deem inappropriate. They've already pressured conservative Justice Samuel Alito to recuse himself from January the 6th cases because his wife flew an appeal to heaven flag at their home. And they've tried to side with the Justice Department on Alito's conservative colleague, Clarence Thomas, for bogus ethics complaints. Well, then, why doesn't the court or why doesn't somebody in Congress with a backbone go, whoa, wait just a cotton picket? In the reality of things, nothing gives them that right, Democrats or Republicans. You can't just take the Constitution and wad it up and throw it around until it lands a certain way that you like. Okay, coming up at the bottom of the hour, Kathy Berkshire will be here. And then just after Kathy, a few things that I want to talk about relative to some things that came up during the debate. Kamala Harris and her fracking lies. And I'm not trying to be funny, but that's one of the main lies that she told. We'll talk about that. You know, if anybody else flip-flopped as much as her, you'd have to open your own pancake house. I mean, she's got so many flip-flops and flapjacks going on around here, and nobody, including the two people sitting there at the table for the people that were sitting there supposedly moderating the debate, never called her into question on anything. Not once. Not one time. The President of the United States, former president, even said, you know, you might want to ask her about this, and this. And I was watching it, and I was like, yeah, and they didn't. Are you afraid? You guys there, are you absolutely afraid? Is that what's going on? Because that's what it looked like to me. If I was ABC, I would be embarrassed. This won't happen, by the way. But I would have yanked those two in my office the next day and said, I don't know what you guys thought you were doing to help the network, but you didn't. You did not do it. That's my take, and that might be all it is, and that's okay. I'll live with it. I'm glad you're with us. Don't forget, a lot coming on as the show goes on. Stay right here with us, right here at WOWO 92.3 FM and also WOWO 1190 AM. Write me, Pat Miller, all one word, no dots or dashes, Pat Miller at WOWO.com. See you coming up straight ahead. And welcome back. It's our second half hour on this Saturday. Very, very glad that you guys are with us here on the Pat Miller program, and very, very glad that this guest is with us. She's one of my favorite people on the planet, and she knows that. And don't worry, my wife already knows it, as does her husband. But Kathy Berkshire, Kathy Berkshire is one of my favorite people because you are the president now for Honor Flight Northeast Indiana.
Correct.
3 years, 4 years?
This is my third year.
Okay, all right. Because I remember when that happened at the hotel out north. You know,
Yeah.
and I remember when because I didn't know that.
Podcasts by Federated Media.